In a forgotten village at the foot of old hills, where the wind smells of wild olives and children once played in dusty streets, life has turned fragile. The river is shrinking, the fields are barren, and hunger whispers through every home. But on the edge of the village lives Hanna, a potter whose hands shape more than clay. With every jar she molds, every crack she mends, and every whispered prayer over her wheel, she teaches her people what it means to trust the unseen potter who shapes every soul. When famine tests the village's faith and fear threatens to divide them, Hanna's humble jars become more than vessels for water or grain. They become symbols of hope, provision, and God's perfect timing. This isn't just the story of clay and drought. It's the story of how God takes what seems small, broken, or wasted, and uses it to shine His light. There's a small village at the bottom of some old hills. The wind there smells like wild olives and the sounds of sheep echo at sunset. The houses are made of rough stone and mud, and their wooden doors creak like they're telling old stories. Life here is slow and steady, like the seasons changing. The men farm the land with slow-moving oxen. The women spin wool and bake bread on hot stones, and the kids play games in the dusty streets. But one woman in the village is different. Her name is Hanna, and she's a potter, a master of working with clay. She doesn't have a husband or children, but no one pities her. Her hands have a gift that feels like it's from heaven itself. Her little home is on the edge of the village, near the path that goes down to a narrow but constant stream called the Kedron. Every morning before the sun comes up, Hanna walks down to the stream with a basket. Her bare feet press into the cool earth, and she kneels at the water's edge. She chooses her clay carefully, not in a hurry, looking for the softest parts that will bend to her touch. She lifts the heavy, wet clay into her hands and carries it back up the hill to her small workshop. Her workshop is nothing special. It's just one room made of rough wood with a leaky roof. Inside, she has two treasures, a potter's wheel and a stone kiln. They belong to her father, who was a potter before her. When he died, he left her only these tools and the memory of his skill. Others might have seen this as poverty, but Hanna saw it as a sacred purpose, a gift she had to honor. Day after day, she leans over the wheel, her clothes covered in clay, her hands shaping lumps of mud into simple and beautiful pots. The wheel hums softly as she spins it, a steady beat like a heartbeat. The clay rises under her fingers, becoming tall and strong. People who pass by often stop, captivated by the quiet magic of her work. They're amazed at how the clay gives in to her touch, as if it had been waiting for her to give it shape. But Hanna never takes credit. When a pot is finally finished, she lifts her clay-covered hands and whispers a prayer only heaven can hear. "Not my hands, O Lord, but yours." The villagers often wonder at her patience. Clay is tricky. It can crack if it gets too dry, fall apart if it's too wet, and sometimes it just won't cooperate. But Hanna never gets angry with the clay. Instead, she treats every pot as if it's alive, as if there's a hidden song inside its rough form that only her hands can bring out. If a jar breaks in two, she doesn't throw it away in a fit of rage. She gently gathers the pieces, sighs, and sometimes late at night she grinds them into powder to mix with fresh clay. "Even what's broken can be given new life," she murmurs, a secret to herself. Her neighbors admire her work, but they can rarely afford to buy it. The village isn't wealthy. The little money people have comes from selling olives, figs, or woven cloth in bigger towns. Most days, Hanna sells a jug here, a bowl there, just enough to keep oil in her lamp and bread on her table. But she doesn't lose hope. For her, the wheel isn't just work, it's a form of worship. The kiln isn't just a fire, it's a sacred place. When the flames roar and the intense heat turns soft clay to hard stone, Hanna sits in front of the kiln and prays, her eyes lifted to the sky. The flickering light makes her face glow with golden shadows. She whispers, "Lord, just as the fire makes the work of my hands strong, let your spirit make my heart strong." The elders say her father once told her a truth she never forgot. The clay doesn't tell the potter what to do, it yields to his hand. We must also yield to God, the eternal craftsman. She holds this memory in her soul like a lamp. The seasons pass this way. The river swells in the spring, shrinks in the summer, and swells again with the autumn rains. Hanna's workshop always smells like earth and smoke, and even though her life is simple, she lives with quiet dignity. For those who truly look, her pots are more than just jars. They seem to speak of hope, of patience, and of unseen hands guiding both clay and soul. But beyond the hills, a different kind of wind is blowing, one of hardship. The clouds become stingy with their rain, and farmers start to whisper that the soil isn't drinking water like it used to. The grain harvests get smaller, the figs shrivel on their branches, and the kedron, while still flowing, gets lower each month. Life in the village, once so stable, starts to wobble. Hanna sees it too, though she doesn't talk about it. When she goes down to the river, she sees the cracks in the banks getting deeper. The stones that were once covered in water now bare and shining in the sun. The clay she gathers is harder, less flexible, and she has to work longer to soften it. Still, she works. Still, she prays. And still, she whispers her trust in the unseen giver. Even as the shadows of need get closer, Hanna's wheel keeps turning, slow and steady, just like faith itself. The days of plenty grow fewer, though there was never much to begin with. The bread in the villagers' homes gets thinner, and their voices sound tired when they talk about the fields. Some murmur about leaving, about looking for better land in towns far away, but the old men frown at this talk. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away, they say. We must endure. Hanna hears all of this as she walks through the marketplace. She sees mothers holding dates in their palms, deciding whether to spend their last coin. She watches the shepherds return with smaller flocks than before, but she doesn't let fear take over her heart. Every morning she still goes to the river, even though the water now just laps weakly against the stones. One morning, as she kneels at the riverbed, she scoops up the clay and finds it stiff, dry on the edges, harder than it has ever been. She presses it between her fingers, and it crumbles to dust. She has to dig deeper into the mud to find a part that's moist enough to use. She lifts it carefully into her basket, whispering as if to the clay itself, "You are not forgotten. You will yet be shaped." When she gets back to her workshop, her arms aching from the weight, she sets the basket on the floor and sits in silence. The kiln is cold. She has little wood left to burn. Her oil jar is nearly empty, her bread just a crust. But before touching the wheel, she kneels on the dirt floor, her head bowed. "O Lord, you are the true potter. Shape me as I shape this clay. Provide for me, as you have always done." Then she gets up, washes her hands, and begins again. The wheel spins, the clay rises, her fingers press and smooth. Slowly, a shape appears. First a wide-bellied jar, then a narrow neck. But as she works, the clay wobbles, stumbles, and finally collapses into a lump again. Hanna closes her eyes, her breathing calm, and starts over. The villagers who watch just shake their heads. "She's working for nothing," some whisper. "Who will buy her pots when all we want is grain and oil?" But Hanna's hands don't stop. She knows that pots, even humble ones, are needed. Water must be stored, flour must be kept, oil must be poured, and beyond a simple need, she believes that beauty itself is a gift, a provision from God for tired souls. If no one else sees it, she sees it. If no one else believes it, she believes it. As the sun sets and shadows stretch across her small house, she lifts the finished jar from the wheel. It's simple, unadorned, but in its plainness, it holds a quiet strength. She sets it by the kiln, lights her tiny flame, and whispers once more, "Not mine, O Lord, but yours." As the months go by, the land itself seems to groan. The earth cracks from the heat, the fields grow little more than weeds, and the once green hills turn brown. The kedron shrinks to a thin ribbon, crawling slowly between banks that get wider and barer each week. Where children once played and women once washed clothes, there is now only silence, broken by the call of thirsty crows circling above. The villagers become restless. Their eyes, once kind, now shift with suspicion, as if every neighbor is a competitor for survival. Grain is counted one kernel at a time. Goats are sold off in a hurry. The market stalls are half empty, their awnings flapping in winds that carry dust instead of rain. Hanna walks through these streets with quiet steps, her basket at her side. She has little to trade, for her jars rarely sell now. "Who needs a pot?" one man said, "when there's nothing left to put in it?" His words echo in her mind as she returns to her workshop. That night, she lights her lamp with the last drops of oil and sits before the kiln, even though it's dark and cold. Her stomach aches from hunger. Her throat is dry. She clasps her calloused hands together, still streaked with clay, and whispers into the silence, "Lord of heaven and earth, my eyes look to you. You feed the sparrows and clothe the lilies. Will your hand forget your child?" Her prayer hangs in the stillness. The stars outside shine faintly through the cracks in her roof, as if listening. And even though no voice answers, she feels a quiet, firm resolve inside her, like unseen fingers shaping her own soul. So the next morning, though weaker than before, she sets her wheel in motion again. Her neighbors shake their heads, pitying or mocking her stubbornness. But she knows this: the clay must be formed because that is her calling. Whether the world buys her pots or not, she will not stop working, because her trust isn't in what people will buy, but in the giver of all things. The drought continues, pushing the whole village toward despair. But in Hanna's humble house, the wheel still turns. Its steady hum is an act of defiance against hopelessness, a song no one sings with their lips but that all hearts can hear if they listen long enough. And in heaven, though she can't see it, a plan is already in motion. The weeks of thirst turn into months. Dust clings to everything, settling on rooftops and creeping into doorways. Even the ancient olive trees drop their leaves in defeat. Children no longer play in the streets. Their laughter has been replaced by quiet cries as their mothers search for crumbs in the cupboards. Hanna's own home is getting bare. The shelves that once held rows of pots now have fewer, because she has traded some away for bread or oil, even though the trades are becoming poor and uneven. More often than not, she is turned away with only a shake of the head. Her lamp no longer burns, her kiln is cold, and the clay in her basket has hardened into stone. Yet still, every morning, she rises. Though her body is weak, she goes to the riverbed, where only a few trickles of water glimmer between the rocks. She kneels there, scraping the ground for bits of clay, her fingers raw and cracked. She finds so little that it seems pointless. Just a handful of mud, barely enough for a child's cup. Yet, as she gathers it into her basket, she whispers, "What is small in the hands of man is not small in the hands of God." Back at her wheel, she wets the clay with the last of her stored water. The wheel turns slowly, her foot faltering on the pedal, but she keeps going. The clay resists, collapsing more than once. Her arms tremble with exhaustion. Her eyes blur with unshed tears. Still, she doesn't stop. When the pot finally stands, crude and imperfect, she places it next to the cold kiln and falls to her knees. "Lord, I am just dust. The vessel of my life feels as empty as these jars. Yet I know you are the potter, and your hand will not abandon what it has formed." Silence is her only answer, deep and heavy. Outside, the village murmurs with fear and hunger. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howls into the night. And yet, unseen beyond the hills, a traveler has already started his journey toward the village. He carries silver coins and has a purpose he doesn't yet understand. His feet are guided, though he doesn't know it, toward the humble home of a woman whose faith clings to hope, like clay clings to the hand of its maker. The drought still has its grip on the land. Darkness still presses on the hearts of the people. But heaven is moving, and help is getting closer. The first firing comes on a morning when the winds are dry and fierce. Hanna has gathered enough wood for the kiln. though each stick has been a sacrifice. She carefully stacks her pots inside the furnace, praying over each one as if it were a child. When the flames rise, their roar seems alive. The kiln glows red, and the heat feels intense on her face. Hanna sits on the ground, her arms wrapped around her knees, waiting. Smoke clings to her hair, and ash covers her skin. Her eyes never leave the fire. Hours pass. Finally, she opens the kiln. Her heart lifts at the sight of shiny pots, jars that are strong and whole, their clay hardened into something beautiful. She reaches for the first one with trembling hands. It rings with a clean, sharp sound when she taps it, a sound of strength. But her joy fades when she sees the others. One pot lies shattered, collapsed in on itself. Another has a long crack from top to bottom. Several, though they look smooth on the outside, have thin, hidden fissures like scars. Hanna's heart breaks with them. She falls to her knees among the broken pieces and cries out, "Lord, I shaped them with care. Why must they be broken?" The silence of the kiln presses in on her. But within her, a thought rises that isn't her own. The fire reveals what is hidden. Only what survives the furnace can carry life. She holds the cracked pot in her hands. Its flaw makes it useless for storing grain or water. But when she pours a little oil inside, the light from her small lamp shines through the crack, casting a thin beam into the darkened room. She gasps. What she saw as ruined now has a strange beauty. The crack, once a sign of weakness, has become a channel for light. That night, she places the flawed pot on her shelf next to the perfect ones. It reminds her that God's plans are bigger than her understanding, and that even the broken can bear His light. In the days that follow, she fires more pots. Some survive, strong and pure. Others break, some in silence, some in a sudden collapse. Each time her heart aches, but each time she remembers the lesson of the lamp. The potter wastes nothing, and little by little the village begins to notice. For in the evenings, a soft glow shines from Hanna's house, not just from her lamp, but from the cracked pot that lets the light spill out into the night. Children point, whispering about the glowing jar. The weary pause to watch, and though they don't yet understand, something inside them stirs, a hunger not for food, but for something else entirely. The jars of hope. The drought becomes even more severe. Fields that were once green are now gray and brittle, their stalks snapping like dry bones in the wind. The river that once sang through the valley is now a thin trickle, its bed cracked and thirsty. The villagers become gaunt, their eyes hollow with hunger. Mothers clutch children whose ribs show sharply against their skin. Fathers wander far in search of work or food, their steps heavy with despair. Hanna's small home is no different. Her jars stand in neat rows on the shelves, each one carefully shaped and fired, but no one buys them. Who would spend what little they have on pots when their stomachs are empty? More than once, Hanna stares at her jars and thinks about smashing them all, about burning the clay and being done with it. But something stops her. The memory of the crack glowing with light. The whisper that the potter wastes nothing. Still, doubt gnaws at her. Her meals get smaller. A crust of bread stretched over 3 days. A handful of lentils soaked in thin water. Her body weakens. Her face hollows out. When she kneels to pray, the words feel heavy and slow, as if even her prayers are withering. One evening, as the sun bleeds red on the horizon, Hanna sits at her wheel, staring at a lump of clay. Her hands rest limply on her knees. "Lord," she whispers, "why have you set my hands to this? The village is hungry. I am hungry. These jars sit silent and empty. What good are they in this famine?" Her tears fall on the clay, softening its surface. She presses her fingers into it, even though she feels no strength left. The clay gives in, slowly rising into a shape. The wheel turns, steady and patient, as if it's following a rhythm that isn't her own. The pot that appears is simple, without fancy designs, but it is strong and wide, perfect for holding grain or water. Hanna sets it aside, though she doesn't know who will ever use it. That night she dreams. She sees a great hand, strong and scarred, shaping her own hands on the wheel. She hears a voice like rushing water. Do not despise the work of your hands. In the drought I am storing rain. In the famine I am preparing bread. When she wakes, her heart is shaking. Was it just a dream, or a message from God himself? That morning, she gets up and places her pots outside, where everyone can see them. She has nothing else to give, nothing else to offer. If God wills it, he can use even clay to answer hunger. The villagers walk by, some pausing, some shaking their heads. But a spark has been lit. Though they don't yet know why, their eyes linger on the pots, and even though Hanna's cupboard is still bare, the quiet promise of provision has begun to stir. The silence of famine is different from any other. It's not the quiet of peace or the hush of dawn, but the heavy stillness of emptiness. There's no laughter of children playing, no sound of sickles cutting through fields, only the rasp of dry wind against cracked earth and the growl of empty stomachs. Hanna lies on her mat, weak from hunger. Her hands, once strong from kneading clay, tremble when she lifts them. Her breath feels shallow, her body light, as if it might float away. Her jars surround her, silent witnesses in the gloom. Rows of pots, each shaped with care, each waiting, each unused. She turns her face toward them, and bitterness rises in her. Lord, she whispers, why do you give me the gift of shaping pots, yet deny me the bread to fill them? The words echo in her chest like stones dropped into an empty well. She presses her palms to her eyes, ashamed of the doubt, but unable to stop it. Have you forgotten me? Have you turned away from my house? No answer comes, only the crackle of her small lamp and the sigh of wind through the roof. But in that silence, Hanna pours out her heart until she has no words left, only tears and groans. Her body shakes with them until she finally lies still, completely drained. And then, in the quiet, a memory stirs, not of bread or of feasts from long ago, but of a scripture whispered to her as a child. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food at the proper time. You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing. Her lips move without her thinking about it. At the proper time, Lord, at the proper time. Peace doesn't rush in like a flood. It comes like a thin thread, fragile, almost breakable, but real, just enough to keep her breathing, enough to keep her hands from shattering the jars in despair. She gets up and walks among her pots, touching each one gently, as if blessing them. Her fingers linger on a wide jar she had shaped just a few nights before, strong, deep, waiting. She whispers over it, "If you will fill even one, I will give you thanks." That night, sleep finally claims her, and while she sleeps, God begins to act. For at dawn, a weary traveler stumbles into the village. His clothes are torn, his skin burned by the sun. On his back, he carries a sack of grain, heavy and precious. He is looking for a pot to store it, so it doesn't spoil or get lost. And he hears of a woman whose house is filled with jars. When Hanna wakes, her cupboard still bare. She doesn't yet know that her prayer in the silence has already opened the door to a miracle. The sun rises pale and thin over the empty fields, painting the sky in a weary gold. Hanna steps outside her home, her body still weak, her thoughts still heavy with the prayer she whispered in the night. The village stirs slowly, a few women drawing the little water that remains, children too tired to play, men sharpening tools even though there is no harvest to gather. She moves among her jars, wiping the dust from their rims. Her fingers trace the smooth curves, her heart still caught between doubt and hope. Her prayer clings to her lips. At the proper time, Lord. It is then that she sees him, a man at the edge of the town square, leaning heavily on a staff. His robe is torn, his skin dark from many days in the sun. He carries a sack on his back, so heavy it makes his shoulders bow. Every step he takes seems like a battle against collapse. The villagers eye him with suspicion. Strangers are rare during a famine, and most bring only trouble, never a blessing. But the man lifts his head and calls out with a hoarse but strong voice, "Is there a vessel here, a strong jar, where I can put what I am carrying?" Hanna gasps. A vessel? Her heart leaps, even though her mind warns her not to hope too quickly. She steps forward, weak but steady. "What is it you carry, sir?" The man adjusts the sack, wincing from the weight. "Grain. A gift, a leftover, a mercy from far-off villages where the rains have not failed." "I cannot carry it any farther, but it must be stored or it will be lost. Do you have a jar large enough to keep it safe?" Grain. The word rings like a bell in Hannah's chest. She quickly gestures for him to come into her home. The man's eyes widen as he enters and sees the rows upon rows of pots. A weary smile forms on his lips. "Surely the Lord himself has led me here." Hanna shows him the wide, sturdy jar she had shaped just a few nights before, the one she had prayed over. The man kneels, untying the sack with trembling fingers, and pours golden kernels into the pot. The sound of grain against clay fills the room like music. Tears blur Hannah's sight as she watches the jar fill, not to the top, but enough. Enough to keep them going. Enough to remind her that the potter wastes nothing. The man, relieved of his burden, sinks against the wall. Hanna brings him water, though it is little, and he drinks deeply. His eyes soften as he looks at her. "Woman, may you be blessed. For even though famine is on these roads, the Lord has not forgotten you." Word spreads quickly through the village. Grain has arrived, and the woman with the jars has been chosen to guard it. The people gather, amazed at the pot, touching its rim, whispering that perhaps God's provision has finally begun to stir. Hanna, though still hungry, feels strength return to her spirit. She looks at her hands, hands that had shaped clay in weakness and doubt. And for the first time, she begins to believe they were not idle at all. The jar stands tall, filled with grain, and next to it, many more jars wait, empty, but ready. The first jar of grain does not remain a secret for long. News travels fast through the famine-stricken village on hushed voices and hopeful whispers. Hannah's jar has grain. Some speak of it as a rumor, others as a true story, but all feel the tremor of hope it carries. By midday, the narrow path to Hannah's home has become a slow-moving stream of people. Mothers with children clinging to their skirts, tired men with hollow eyes, and elders leaning on their staffs, all come, drawn by the promise that perhaps God has remembered them. Hanna stands at her doorway, nervous at first, her hands trembling as she welcomes them inside. She fears they might demand more than she has, or empty the pot in a fit of desperation. But something unexpected happens. They don't come to take, they come to give. The first woman arrives with a small bundle of dried lentils, a portion she had carefully saved for her family. "I heard the stranger left grain with you," she says softly. "If you have a pot, please keep this too. Together it might last longer." Hannah's eyes widen and her heart swells. She guides the woman to a tall, narrow jar and pours the lentils in. The dry sound echoes in the room like rain on stone. Soon after, an old man shuffles forward, carrying a pouch of barley seeds. "Too few to plant," he mutters, "but too precious to lose. Put them in your jars, woman. Perhaps they will find their purpose in time." And so they come, one by one. Each villager, though burdened by their own needs, carries something small. A handful of beans, a few dates hard as stone, a few cracked nuts, even herbs wrapped in cloth. And Hanna receives them all, guiding each offering to the pot best suited for it. Her home begins to change. The once empty jars no longer stand silent and bare. They grow heavy with provision, each one holding a different treasure. The air inside fills with the mingled scents of grain, legumes, fruit, and spice. Where despair had hung like dust, now the fragrance of sustenance fills the air. Children peer into the jars with wide eyes, their fingers twitching to touch. Their mothers hush them, whispering that these pots are not just made of clay, but of mercy. Hanna works until her arms ache, lifting lids, sealing jars, arranging them with care. But even though her body is tired, her spirit soars. She sees now that her work was not wasted. The potter's hand had guided hers long before hunger came, preparing her to be ready when the miracle arrived. One evening, as the last villager leaves, leaving behind a small bundle of dried figs, Hanna sinks onto her mat. She gazes at the rows of jars, once empty, now living proof of God's faithfulness. Tears blur her vision. She whispers aloud, as if to the pots themselves, "You were not shaped in vain." The stranger who brought the first grain still lingers in the village. He often comes to Hanna's house watching the jars fill. His eyes hold a quiet wonder, and one evening he says to her, "Don't you see, woman? These pots are no longer just yours. They are the Lord's pantry for this people." And in Hanna's heart, she knows it is true. The famine has not ended. The fields are still dry, the skies still empty. Yet in the midst of the barrenness, help has begun to grow. And though her own stomach still tightens with hunger, her spirit tastes the bread of heaven, the assurance that God's hand is on her and her jars. One pot had been filled, then another, and another still. Soon, it seems, every jar might find its purpose. And in the silence of the night, Hanna no longer prays with groans, but with gratitude. "Lord, you fill what we bring. You bless what we surrender, and you waste nothing." At first, the jars are a miracle everyone celebrates. Children laugh again, mothers sing as they prepare small meals, and even the tired men of the village walk with a little more spring in their step. The name of God is spoken with gratitude in every home, and Hanna's house becomes a place of hope. But as the days pass and more offerings come, the jars grow heavier, and a subtle uneasiness begins to stir. What started as communal joy turns into quiet questions whispered at night. How much is stored now? Who decides when it is used? What if there's not enough when my family needs it most? Hanna feels the change like a shift in the wind. Once villagers came eagerly, bringing their small contributions with joy. Now some arrive with worried looks, asking how much is left and how it's being guarded. Others linger too long at the doorway, their eyes fixed on the jars as if measuring them in secret. One evening, as Hanna seals the lid on a pot of grain, a man steps forward. He is a landowner, though his fields now lie barren, his wealth gone. "Woman," he says firmly, "these jars should be locked and accounted for. What if thieves come in the night? What if someone takes more than their share?" Another voice rises from the crowd. "Yes. What if the jars are emptied before the rains return? Shouldn't we guard them carefully to ensure our survival?" Hanna's heart wavers. She too has thought about thieves in the night. She too has wondered if the jars will last. But as she places her hand on the cool clay, a whisper comes to her spirit. "Did I give to you that you might hoard or that you might trust?" Her voice shakes, but she answers, "These jars are not mine. They belong to the Lord. He who filled them can fill them again." The villagers murmur among themselves. Some nod, their faces softened by faith. Others frown, their fear heavier than their trust. That night, Hanna cannot sleep. She lies awake, hearing every creak of wood, every sigh of wind, imagining shadows slipping through her doorway to steal the food. Her body aches with exhaustion, but her spirit battles between fear and faith. Toward dawn, she gets up and kneels among the jars. Her hands rest on their lids as if to protect them. Her voice trembles in the stillness. "Lord, you see the hunger of your people. You see the fear in their eyes. Teach us to trust you, even when we have a lot. Don't let us sin by clinging too tightly to what you have given." As the prayer leaves her lips, a deep peace settles in her chest, even though the jars haven't changed. She knows what she must do. The next morning, when the village gathers again, Hanna stands before them. "The jars will remain open," she says. "Whoever is hungry may come. Whoever has something small to give may add it. We will not lock them away. We will trust the giver, not the gift. Gasps and protests ripple through the crowd. Some cry that it's reckless. Others, quietly relieved, nod with tears in their eyes. And so it is. The jars remain open, and though food leaves them daily, food also enters daily. One family gives and another receives. What seems to get smaller never completely empties, because provision flows in unexpected ways. Yet not all hearts are content. In secret, some still plot, thinking about how much they can claim for themselves. The test of abundance has begun, and Hanna knows that the true trial isn't the famine outside the village, but the famine inside people's hearts. And she whispers again as her hands touch the clay, "Lord, let us not fail this test." The village sleeps under a sky thick with clouds, heavy and waiting for rain that never comes. Hanna lies restless on her mat, her ears tuned to every sound. Since the jars had been opened freely, she has felt both peace and unease, like standing in sunlight while watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. That night, a noise breaks the stillness. Soft at first, then clearer. The scrape of clay against clay. A lid shifting. Footsteps too careful to be innocent. Hanna gets up silently, her breath tight in her chest. She steps toward the jars, the moonlight slanting through the small window, casting long shadows across the pots. And there, bent over one of the largest jars, is a man. His hands shake as he tries to lift a sack of grain. His eyes dart around like those of a hunted animal, wild and desperate. Hanna's voice, though low, cuts through the silence. "Brother, what are you doing?" The man freezes, then slowly turns. It's Caleb, one of the farmers whose land has turned to dust in the drought. His children are thin as reeds, his wife hollow-eyed from hunger. His voice cracks as he speaks. "I couldn't wait. My little ones cry all night. Their bones show through their skin. I was afraid that if I came by day, there would be nothing left for them." Hanna's heart twists. She sees the sack in his hands, heavy with more grain than his family could eat in many days. She also sees the fear that has consumed him, a fear that whispers there will never be enough. "Caleb," she says gently, "these jars are not guarded because they belong to the Lord. You don't have to steal what he has already offered. Come tomorrow and take what you need, as everyone else can." But Caleb shakes his head wildly, tears streaming down his face. "Tomorrow might be too late. If others take first, what will be left for my family?" "It's better to take now and be sure." His words hit her like a blade. It's the voice of the famine itself, the cry of scarcity. For a moment she hesitates. Who is she to tell a father how to feed his children? Yet a deeper whisper stirs within her spirit. The test isn't whether he is hungry, but whether he trusts. Hanna steps closer, her hands trembling but steady. "Caleb, listen. If you take more than is given, you choose fear over faith. But if you trust, the same God who filled this jar once will fill it again. Will you believe this?" Caleb's breathing is ragged. His eyes flicker from the sack to the jar, from Hanna's face to the floor. Then, with a groan that sounds like both surrender and sorrow, he drops the sack. Grain spills across the floor, a small golden river glimmering in the moonlight. He sinks to his knees, covering his face with his hands. "Forgive me, Hanna. Forgive my weakness." Hanna kneels beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "It is not I who must forgive. The one who sees your heart also sees your pain. Come tomorrow with your family, and you will have what you need." At dawn, the village discovers the spilled grain on the floor. Whispers spread quickly. Some condemn Caleb as a thief. Others defend him, saying hunger drives even the best men to desperate acts. Hanna stands before them, her voice clear and strong even though her body is still tired. "Let no one condemn him, for what was almost taken has been returned. This was not the failure of one man, but the testing of us all. We must choose every day to fear there will not be enough, or to trust the one who gives without end." Her words settle over the people like dew. Some bow their heads in shame, realizing the same fear lurks in there. own hearts. Others breathe easier, grateful for mercy. And even though the spilled grain is swept up and placed back into the jar, the lesson lingers. Help isn't just about full bellies, but about hearts learning to trust. That night, as Hanna smooths her hands over the jars once more, she whispers into the quiet, "Lord, we are still learning. Don't give up on us." And outside, though the rain does not yet fall, the air smells faintly of promise. The village is exhausted. Weeks have passed since the first grain arrived, and though the jars remain full, the land outside is still cracked and lifeless. The sky hangs heavy with gray, promising nothing, the sun burning weakly through the haze. Hanna gets up before dawn, as is her habit, and walks to the edge of the village. Her eyes sweep across the barren fields. The riverbed is a pale scar through the valley, the hills dry and brittle. She kneels in the dust, her hands clasped in prayer. "Lord," she whispers, "you have fed us with your gifts through pots of clay, but the earth is thirsty. The cattle are weak. The children's mouths still ache for water. Will we last without your mercy on the land?" Her words rise like smoke into the sky, fragile against the vastness above. She rises, tired, and returns to her house. The jars gleam faintly in the early light, filled with grain, beans, lentils, fruit. A provision beyond her imagination, yet still not enough to satisfy the land's thirst. And then it happens. A faint sound at first, the soft patter of drops on tile, on dust, on dry earth. The villagers freeze, children staring, their mouths open. Women lift jars and tilt their lids, listening. Men raise their heads toward the sky, in disbelief. Rain, not a thin drizzle, but a gentle, steady rain of mercy. It seeps into the soil, curling through cracks, softening the riverbed. The dust of weeks becomes mud. Tiny streams begin to form, winding like silver threads toward the village fountain. Hanna steps outside, her face turned to the sky, her heart trembling. The drops splash on her cheeks, cool and cleansing. She allows herself to laugh, a pure sound long forgotten. The morning after the rain, the village wakes up transformed. The earth, once cracked and gray, now glistens with life. Tiny green shoots push from the soil, carrying the promise of future crops. Puddles sparkle in the sunlight, and the river, for so long a pale scar, trickles with water once again. Children run through the mud, laughing, their cries of joy echoing off walls that had been silent for weeks. Mothers dance with them, lifting them high, their faces bright with relief. Fathers, though still tired, smile, their eyes softening as they feel hope bloom in their hearts. Hanna stands at the doorway of her home, looking at the rows of jars inside. Each is full, a testament not only to her skill, but to God's faithfulness. But her heart goes beyond the pots themselves. She looks at her neighbors, the men and women and children who had waited and feared, and who now rejoice. She steps outside, letting the rain soak her clothes, and calls to the villagers. "Come, see the Lord's provision. Come, celebrate what he has done." They gather around, a crowd filled with awe and gratitude. The cracked jar, once dismissed as flawed, now reflects the sunlight streaming through the window, its imperfections gleaming like gold. Hanna lifts her hands over it, a smile softening her features. Even the broken are used in his plan. Today, we're thinking about a story of faith, trust, and a true miracle. It's the story of Hanna, a simple woman who made pots from clay during a time of great hunger. Every pot she made wasn't just pottery, it was a testament to God's provision and the strength of faith in action. The Bible tells us, "The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food at the proper time. You open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing." Psalm 145, 15, 16. And again, "But my God will supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus." Philippians 4:19. Hanna faced drought, hunger, and fear. Her hands shook, her jars sat empty, yet she kept shaping the clay. She trusted that God would provide. And because of her obedience, God's provision came, first as a single jar of grain, then as a blessing that multiplied through her faith and the generosity of others. The clay in Hannah's hands teaches us a deep truth. God molds our lives like clay. When we feel weak, broken, or unsure, He is shaping us. Even our cracked places, our moments of failure or imperfection, can become ways for His light to shine. As it says in the Bible, "But He said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.'" 2 Corinthians 12:9. We often fear not having enough. We cling to what we have or act out of desperation. Caleb, the man who almost stole from the jars, shows us this temptation. God's mercy corrected him, but it also showed the whole village, and us, that faith isn't just a passive belief. Faith must be lived out, especially when things get tough. A crucial lesson from Hannah's story is that faithfulness is not a seasonal practice. It's a daily commitment, especially in the ordinary, unseen moments. Hannah didn't just become faithful when the drought began or when the grain arrived. Her character was formed long before, in the daily quiet act of shaping clay. While her neighbors were just living their lives, she was kneeling by the river, carefully selecting mud. She was patiently working at her wheel, shaping vessels no one was buying. Her trust wasn't a sudden response to a crisis. It was the result of years of consistent, unglamorous faithfulness. The pots were a physical representation of her quiet devotion. The story highlights this truth. When the great need arose, Hannah was ready. Her hands were skilled, her heart was prepared, and her home was filled with jars, all because of the small, faithful choices she had made every single day. The extraordinary miracle of the jars filling with grain was a direct outcome of her ordinary faithfulness. This teaches us that our most important work often happens in the silence. The choices we make when no one is watching, to be patient, to be kind, to keep our promises, to continue practicing our craft even when it seems pointless, are the choices that prepare us for the great challenges and blessings to come. The drought didn't create Hannah's faith, it revealed it. As Galatians 6:9 reminds us, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Just like Hannah, we are all in a season of preparation. The daily work we do, the habits we build, and the quiet acts of trust we practice are not wasted. They are the very things that will equip us to face our own famines and to be ready when God's provision arrives. This quiet preparation also shaped how Hannah saw her struggles. Our brains are wired to create and follow narratives. A deep, trusting faith provides a powerful narrative framework that gives meaning and purpose to suffering. Instead of seeing the drought as a random, meaningless event, Hannah viewed it as part of a larger, divinely guided story. This sense of purpose activates the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine that motivates us to act. When Hannah said, "You are not forsaken, you shall yet be shaped," she wasn't just talking to the clay, she was reinforcing a deeply held belief in her own brain's narrative. This powerful self-talk strengthened her resolve and prevented her from succumbing to hopelessness. It transformed her struggle from a point of despair into a part of her faithful journey, making it a source of strength rather than defeat. In essence, a deep, trusting faith provides a neurological roadmap for navigating life's challenges. It shifts the brain from a state of survival to one of thriving, giving us the cognitive and emotional tools to find peace and purpose no matter the circumstances. As Romans 8:28 declares, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." And when we bring together both her quiet faithfulness and her purposeful perspective, we see how her life illustrates practical lessons for us today. This story teaches us a few important lessons about living a life of faith, obedience before outcome. Hannah continued to make pots even when the village was hungry and no one was buying. Like her, we have to obey God's calling without waiting to see immediate results. Trusting Him means doing what's right even when it doesn't make sense to us. John 14:15, "If you love me, keep my commands." Trust in God's timing. The help came in His time, not hers. What seems late to us is always perfect in God's eyes. Our job is to be ready, not to control when the blessing arrives. Ecclesiastes 3:11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Generosity over fear. The jars were shared freely, even when fear whispered that there wasn't enough. When we give what we have in faith, God can make it go further than we ever thought possible. Luke 6:38. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. Embrace our brokenness. Our weaknesses, our scars, and our flaws can actually show God's glory, just like the cracked pot that shone with light. Our broken places are not a waste. They can be the very places where His power is most visible. 2 Corinthians 12:9. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So today, let's ask ourselves, where are we holding on too tightly? Where are we choosing fear over faith? Are we letting God, the master potter, shape our lives even when it's painful? As Isaiah 64:8 says, "We are the clay, you are the potter. We are all the work of your hand." Hannah's jars weren't just pottery. They were tools of faith, teaching her village and us that help comes to those who trust, obey, and surrender. The lesson is clear. God is the potter, we are the clay, and nothing shaped in His hands is ever wasted. If this story resonated with you, comment the word faith below as a declaration of trust in God. And if you've experienced God's provision in your own life, share your story in the comments to encourage and bless others who are listening today.